Hey Wilson, so can you share a bit about your background and what led you to become a mountain biking coach?
Well, I started coaching as soon as I was out of university. And initially, even during university, I was doing coaching part-time, coaching sports. And at that time, my background was in triathlon. So what happened was that as soon as I graduated, I majored in journalism. I figured that I didn't want to do journalism, especially not in Singapore. So I came back to Singapore and I started doing coaching full-time, initially in triathlon.
Nice.
From 2013 to 2016, I worked for a company. So I worked as an employee and I ran their triathlon program and their indoor cycling studio training, essentially. And I went full-time by myself in 2017. I founded Raw Epics, and Raw Epics being a mountain bike skills instruction and coaching company and more, as we'll find out more.
Okay.
And we haven't looked back ever since.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And Wilson, can you share with us more like how is Raw Epics different from other mountain bike coaching companies?
That's a good question. I think it's a good time to share a bit more about myself and what we do. So we are a full suite mountain bike coaching experiential leader in the sense that we provide the instruction required for people to navigate trails safely and smoothly, but we also coach them in terms of their physical conditioning as well as other aspects to get them prepared. Moreover, we also provided guided trips. These are more for people based in Singapore but keen to ride their mountain bike overseas. So we do organize trips for that. Another layer of the business that I'm very passionate about is organizing events. So I run an annual mountain bike event in Singapore. It's called Singapore Open Enduro, and we do the Singapore Open Enduro every January.
January?
Yeah, this coming January 2026 will be the 6th edition of the race.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wilson, can you tell us like what does a holistic coaching approach to improving one's mountain bike riding entail?
I think the most important aspect of mountain biking is that you can't just work on the skills by itself, and you can't just work on the physical training by itself. You kind of have to marry the two together. And these two alone are not sufficient. You actually want to talk about not just the technical part or the physical part, but also the psychological part. I think mountain biking is unique in that it's a very mental intensive kind of sport, and you can actually enjoy more success if you are mentally prepared or mentally conditioned to understand the sport better and tackle the sport better. So we coach clients through this process and hopefully get them to ride and enjoy the sport better. But more on top of that, there's also other things which we want to touch on, including like tactical aspects, equipment aspects, and also we address like how can we handle the environmental aspects. So we can understand the environment that we operate in as well. And I think as a coach who's able to touch on these different realms versus a very one-dimensional or two-dimensional approach, I think this gives our company and what we provide more of an edge.
I'd like to ask, what is the mission of your company, Raw Epics?
The mission of Raw Epics is to optimize the mountain biking experience for riders who are based in Singapore and bring them beyond our shores, hopefully.
Okay, nice. And is mountain bike coaching only for beginners?
I think all kinds of mountain bike riders, regardless of their fitness and their ability, can benefit from mountain bike coaching. And I'll say this and qualify this in the sense that even the top level mountain bike coaches at World Cup level, these are elite athletes. They get coaching as well. They do skills coaching. They probably have a strength conditioning coach to take care of the strength and the physical side of things. They probably have a technical coach to cater to their technical skills development. They probably also have a mental skills coach as well. So when you are a pro athlete and you have access to 3 different kinds of coaches or more,
right.
I guess that's what you go for, right? And I think that's important to understand as somebody who may not be at the pro level, but nonetheless can benefit from coaching. If the pros are doing it, why shouldn't someone who is more of an amateur? I think they can benefit even more from it.
And just so you were saying that Raw Epics also plans mountain bike trips overseas, right? So can you tell us like which destination do your itineraries cover and what can one expect on such a trip?
So these itineraries range across various countries. I started guiding in 2017 properly. And I say proper in the sense that it was quite a unique destination at that time. I ran my first trip to Tasmania, Australia in 2017.
Oh.
And I've gone back every single year except for the COVID years, of course, since then. So Tasmania is my favorite destination to guide at. I've also guided in Nepal.
Oh.
We're working with partners there and working with them in the sense of co-organizing some of the races that are being run there as well, mountain bike races.
Okay.
Last year, we had our first foray into Canada.
Oh.
So we did our first guided trip to British Columbia.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's a beautiful part of Canada. I would say it's like the mecca of mountain bike riding, especially this town called Whistler, which is like Disneyland for mountain bikers. I ran my first trip there. I've been to Whistler before, but last year was my first time visiting in the capacity of a guide and bringing paying clients over there.
Wow.
Yeah, this year we ran our first guided trip to New Zealand as well.
New Zealand.
Yeah, so Nelson, New Zealand, another beautiful town.
Nice.
Perhaps a bit not so much on the mainstream consciousness, but definitely up and coming as a mountain bike destination. This coming year, 2026, we intend to do a trip to the Dolomites in Italy.
Oh.
So we'll try and run a trip there and we work with local vendors whenever we do these kinds of trips, So whether it's Nepal or Australia or Italy or wherever, we always make it a point to touch base with the vendors and work with them. But I think one of the things I want to highlight is that as the so-called fixer for these trips, I'm not just the in-between person or the middleman. I actually enjoy my work as an operator. So what you'll see is that I'm actually certified as an instructor and a guide. So in the sense that I'm a Professional Mountain Bike Instructors Association Level 3 certified instructor, and we're able to guide and instruct people on quite advanced features and in quite remote terrain as well. Additionally, I'm a Wilderness First Responder certificate holder. That means we're able to deal with first aid scenarios in quite remote locations away from immediate medical care.
Understand.
So in the sense that if something happens during a trip, and touch wood, things have gone wrong on trips before and people have gotten injured, I'm actually quite prepared to deal with that. We have the means and capability to address any medical issues.
Right. Okay. And Wilson, I would like to ask you, why are mountain bike trips out of Singapore so important for riders to undertake? And how does that indicate what riders are willing to spend on nowadays?
That's an interesting question. And I feel that you need to consider the geography of Singapore on one hand, and also the mindset of people who take up this sport of mountain biking on the other hand. So Singapore, as you know, is a very small island, geographically constrained, not many hills per se, not to mention mountains.
Yep.
So the number of trails and off-road areas where we can cycle as mountain bikers in Singapore is really quite limited. So if you take up this sport for any length of time in Singapore, you'll find that it's going to get you bored after a while. You ride the same trails or the same round and round circuits and so on. So I think if you're a mountain biker, or if you and your friends are a group of mountain bikers and you want to expand your horizons, you want to do more challenging trails and you want to have better enjoyment and understand more aspects of mountain biking, not just as a sport, but as a culture, and as a pursuit, active pursuit that you can pursue overseas. I think just going overseas and looking for suitable destinations that cater to this itch. I was recently interviewed on CNA and other news media outlets regarding the unfortunate incident where a mountain biker got accidentally shot roaming in a restricted live firing area in the middle of Singapore. This is like a really thick jungle area, but there's trails over there. And one of the questions that I was asked was, why do you want to do that? And I answered that, they have two options. They either do illegal stuff and venture on trails where they are not supposed to be on because it's more exciting. The trails which are illegal are actually more fun, sometimes in better condition than the official trails. Or they could choose the option which is maybe a bit more costly, but definitely legal and safer, which is to go overseas,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think one of the things that is more pertinent to us is more and more people are able to afford going overseas. I think we also live in a time where the concept of having your bike shop or the bike industry ask you to buy a new bike. Every year buy a new bike. this year's bike, forget about last year's bike, just buy a new bike. I think that kind of consumerism is something that we are evolving past now, especially for consumers in Singapore, especially mountain bikers. We are after more experiential-based spending nowadays. And I think mountain biking trips, not necessarily buying a new mountain bike, is the way to address this kind of itch. When they want to perhaps go to new places year after year, but still using the bike that they own from maybe 1, 2 or 3 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And can you tell us what is the difference between a coach, an instructor, and a guide for a mountain bike?
Wow, that's a good question. I think that's perhaps the most important question from this interview. So I'll talk about instructor first. So instructor is usually someone who teaches somebody when they are a complete beginner, when they have no knowledge of the sport or the activity, whereas a coach would be somebody who definitely instructs at certain points in time, but they are more also concerned with the high performance aspect. That means they might want to get this athlete or this rider to perform better or work towards a goal. Definitely when you talk about pro athletes or people who are very competitive, who enter races and events, it's worth their while to hire a coach. So a coach is somebody who would take a long-term view, like a long-term approach to the development of the rider, whereas an instructor may just be instructing for 1 or 2 hours. For example, a total beginner, they want to learn how to get on the bike and use the brake safely and use the shifting safely and use the dropper pole safely and understand how suspension works without killing themselves. They may not necessarily want to do a competition 3 or 4 months down the road, but that's a job of an instructor. So I think coaches also instruct, and instructors sometimes coach, but it will really depend on how long they are seeing the rider for. Now, a guide is completely different. Like if I'm a mountain bike guide, my job is quite different from these other 2 jobs. I need to get you from A to B on a trail or on a route as safely as possible.
Right.
Yeah, so that's what a guide does. The guide is basically like a tour guide. Okay. Does a guide instruct you? Yeah, sometimes, of course. Does a guide coach you? Maybe not, because usually a guide takes care of you when you are more of a tourist, a holiday maker. You just want to get from point A to point B and enjoy your trip and have fun, not necessarily to win this race or that race. So I think from there you can see the distinction between what instructors do, what guides do, and what coaches do.
Right, understand.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. And Wilson, what is the youngest age to start learning mountain biking?
Wow, that's interesting question to ask. I feel that there's no lower limit on when you can actually start. Right. I think you can actually start as young as 3 years old or 4 years old. But the kind of bike you'll be riding, if I was somebody looking to get a kid interested in the riding, is to not get them started on a bike with like trainer wheels. You can imagine a bike with like the 2 main wheels and then 2 trainer wheels on the side. Especially if they don't know how to balance the bike yet. I would say as an instructor, one of the best tools you can do for a kid that age who hasn't learned how to balance yet is to get a strider bike or a walk bike or a run bike, I should say. This is the kind of bike where there's no pedals at all, but there's also no training wheels. So the kid just uses their legs to push the bike along, and they learn balance better that way. A lot of these bikes, which are run bikes or push bikes, they have quite fat tires, so they can be used on not only on roads or pavement, but also on like off-road areas like grass, gravel areas. And I think that's a very easy entry point for someone that age to get into mountain biking eventually.
I see.
They enjoy the off-road aspect. They're not merely restricted to the park connector or the void deck or the basketball court anymore, you see. And in some cases, it's actually safer when you go off-road or when you go on the grass field, actually. If you fall down, touch wood, it's actually safer than falling on a basketball court or falling on a PCN, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. What is the oldest age for someone to start learning mountain biking?
I think one is never too old to pick up mountain biking. I recall a friend of mine who picked up mountain biking in his late 60s.
Late 60s?
Yes, and he's been riding ever since. He started taking up lessons in his late 60s from another instructor. So this guy is still going strong and in his mid-70s now. And he still rides regularly. When I say regularly, I mean at least once a week. I think it's not a matter of when you actually can start. It's more a matter of whether or not you stop and at what age do you stop riding mountain bike. bikes.
True. Is it safe for females to learn mountain biking?
I think it's safe for any person of any gender to learn mountain biking. I can share with you definitively as a coach and instructor, the number of people who are female who seek out instruction or coaching from me is quite high. And I say high relative to the number of females in the total mountain biking population. I would say maybe 1 in 5 of my clients are female.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and this is a high ratio when you consider that the ratio of females to males in mountain biking in general is, in Singapore especially, is closer to 1 in 25 or 1 in 30. That means for every 30 people you see on the trail on a given day, only 1 of them might be female.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's how few females are taking up. But I think more females should definitely take up the sport because it's a cool sport. You know, it's generally male dominated, but what I find that is cool about females is that they are more willing to learn. They're more willing to ask questions, and they're more willing to analyze the sport and maybe seek instruction. I guess that's better business for me.
Than the male population.
Yeah, I think males have this problem, and this is saying as a male myself, I know we just want to chiong and do trial by error and maybe figure it out later just by after trying. Whereas I think females have a better sense of self-preservation and they are more willing to take up instruction and coaching and maybe figure out what they want to do step by step before actually doing it.
Wilson, how is mountain biking different from road cycling, and which is better?
Which is better? We don't say which is better in the sense that instructors or coaches try to draw comparisons. I always like to use this framework when I am comparing certain things, right? We don't say, oh, this is good, this is bad, or this is right, this is wrong. We always say, what are the pros and cons of each sport, or in this case, each activity, right? So if we compare road cycling to mountain biking, I think one of the big advantages is that you don't have trees and rocks on the trail suddenly changing direction or stopping in front of you.
Right.
So if you imagine yourself on the road, sometimes you may be doing everything correctly as a rider, as a road cyclist, and you might be following all the rules of the road, but all it takes is an errant driver or errant motorist to maybe not see you, or maybe intentionally or unintentionally put your life in danger. You know, and when they move the whole vehicle, and the vehicle weighs so much more than yourself as a cyclist, as a rider on a bicycle. So you got to kind of keep that in mind when you talk about safety. Is road cycling better? I would say one of the advantages of road cycling is that, especially in Singapore, is that you have lots of lovely road. I think the quality of the roads in Singapore is excellent. Plus, we have an amazing park connector network in Singapore. You know, we compare the amount of roads and PCN to the amount of trails and the quality of mountain bike trails we have in Singapore. I think the mountain bike trails get beaten fair and square lah. You know, we just have. That's why you see so many more road cyclists and even cyclists who ride like foldies or recreational bikes and so on, you know, compared to mountain bikers. But I think the big advantage that mountain bikers do have over all these is that the mountain bike is very versatile. You can ride it on the PCN, you can ride it on the road, and you can definitely ride it off-road as well. You can switch between all 3 kinds of surfaces. Right. So advantage goes to mountain bike at the end. And it's more versatile, right? As long as you're not racing, as long as you're obeying the rules of the road and so on. I think it's a great tool. It's what I call a freedom machine. So it grants you a lot of freedom.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. And what life skills does a teenager pick up when learning mountain biking?
I think teenagers who ride mountain bikes, they belong in a special category. They exist between childhood and adulthood. And I think coming into your adulthood, especially with mountain biking as a framework to develop, grants them a lot of advantages in that things are not going to go their way all the time. You know, I think mountain biking puts success and failure in a more easy to understand framework. So rather than say that, you know, I'm doing certain things as a teenager and I want to become an adult, you know, if you think of mountain biking as a sport that you do and things are not always going to go your way, the trail is not always going to be smooth, your level of energy or your level of fitness is not always going to be top notch, and there are obstacles on the trail, like actual physical obstacles on the trail that you're going to have to try again to overcome, you know, and not necessarily just with grit or resilience, but also sometimes taking a more unique approach or having a coach approach that includes seeking advice from instructors, from coaches, and maybe having the discipline to to undergo coaching, to undergo training as a person who wants to get better. So if we talk about teenagers who just want to go through life and do so by trial and error versus somebody who takes a more structured approach, especially with the help of a coach who can see through them on a more long-term basis, I think you'll find that teenagers who do mountain biking, on the proviso that they don't lose interest in the sport, obviously, they have a tendency to be more resilient, both physically as well as mentally and emotionally. And I think mountain biking as a sport is a great tool for teenagers to develop themselves holistically when they transfer all these skills into other parts of their lives.
Okay, well, interesting. And I agree with you on that. And I also like to ask you, right, what is one taboo topic that we don't speak openly enough in the Singapore mountain bike scene?
Wow, I love this topic. I have wanted to talk about this for a long time, and I think we need to address it. It's like the elephant in the room, and this has got to do with electric bikes or pedal-assisted bikes. I think there are many electric bikes that exist on the trails in Singapore. There are many riders who ride them. Technically, they are illegal. They are not allowed on official trails in Singapore.
Oh.
There is a blanket ban on e-bikes of any kind on official trails in Singapore by the National Parks Board. I think this is unfortunate, and I think this ban should be repealed at some point in time. It's not a matter of if, but when this will be repealed. The rolling back of this ban should be done in accordance, and especially by observing what has been done in terms of e-bike advocacy in other countries.
Right.
Even if you look at our neighboring mountain bike community in Malaysia, e-bikes there have been legal since e-bikes were invented, and there are many happy people who are able to use e-bikes over there. Further afield, you can observe countries like the US and Canada, or any country in Europe where e-bikes account for more than 50% of all bike sales from bike shops. Yeah, I would say close to 70% or 80% in some bike shops, in some communities. And what are e-bikes used for? Not just for riding off-road, but also for commuting, for more remote access. And when you talk about in the mountain biking context, e-bikes are often used for ferrying certain things like media equipment to cover like sports events.
Yep.
E-bikers are also at an advantage when these e-bikers are also like trail maintenance crew when they do carry heavy equipment, or medical personnel where they have to carry medical equipment into the field to cover sports events or to work at bike parks and such.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think e-bikes in Singapore are a big talking point in the sense that perhaps NParks is taking cue from the Active Mobility Act in Singapore, which covers a lot of e-bikes and regulates e-bike usage on the roads. But I think a blanket approach to just outright ban is too heavy-handed, and it doesn't account for the fact that e-bike properly used in the hands of a experienced rider or a rider who's familiar with its operation doesn't have as much an environmental impact as the same rider on a normal bike. It's like an e-bike might weigh 5 or 6 or 7 kilos heavier than a normal bike. It's the same as somebody who weighs 5 or to 7 kilos heavier on a normal bike, and they are just happen to be very powerful and very fit, and they are inflicting the same amount of so-called environmental impact or damage to the trail per se. And I think a more thorough study needs to be done to assess the comparative impact on the trail maintenance for e-bikes versus regular bikes, and this needs to be done at length. And I think once we get that study going, or we get that conversation going, we can actually start to legalize e-bikes and make e-bikes accessible to more people, because e-bikes are such a convenience and they are able to allow less able people to enjoy the same trails. For example, people who suffer from mobility or cardiovascular conditions which don't allow them to ride regular bikes as far or as fast. So now people who are less mobile, less able, maybe more senior in age, they're able to keep up with people who are fitter or younger than them and enjoy the same trails to the same degree, and to do so safely as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And I would like to ask you, what are the most common skills deficits that riders need help with?
Skills deficits. So I'm going to put on my instructor's hat now. But also a bit of coaching, because I think you definitely need a long-term approach to this.
Yep.
Most people I see who come for a skills class and they say, I want to improve biking, I want to improve my riding. And they say this in a very general sense. What they don't realize is that their body position is the one that usually suffers. So say the top out of the three, the number one thing that suffers a lot is good body position. So they tend to be sitting down a lot. They actually tend to squat a lot rather than ride with straight legs. When they are stood up on the bike, and what happens is that their legs get really tired, and it's not because they are not physically fit. They're actually quite fit. It's just that when they falter, is that they assume that the lower they are and the more they bend their legs, the more stable they are. And actually there are other means of improving their stability and balance on the bike. So I think for number two, in terms of skills, I see a lot of people not so sure about their cornering. They actually don't know how to corner really well, like literally to turn a corner.
Yeah.
And cornering goes hand in hand with brake control. So when somebody says, I want to learn how to turn or corner better, what I hear them saying is that they actually want to learn how to do their brake control better. And I think cornering is a very big and very diverse topic for riders who want to do their mountain biking better, in the sense that I always share with my clients, you'll find trails anywhere in the world where it's completely flat. That means there's no uphill or downhill. You can find a completely flat trail. Okay, Coney Island in near Serangoon is a good example. Okay, you can find trails in the world who have no rocks at all. Okay, like it's all sand or it's all roots or maybe it's all mud. Okay, you can find trails in the world with no roots. So for example, you go to a desert environment. There's no big trees. There's no roots. Okay, you can even find trails where there's no mud and it's completely dry. Okay, but there's no trail in the world that is completely straight. That is in a straight line. You will never find a trail that is in a straight line. The trail will always curve left or right or whatever, or come in a circle around and come back in a loop.
Right.
Whatever it is, whatever trail you ride, you have to corner. You have to know how to turn. So turning, such a broad topic, you could be talking for hours about cornering techniques and cornering tactics. And I love to address that as an instructor.
Right.
I think the third most important thing for riders, out of the three most important skills deficits, I would say, or the three most common skills deficits, is understanding the mental side of things, like understanding their mental skills a bit more.
Okay.
Like how do they build confidence? I think confidence stems a lot from whether they're informed about what they're doing. If they don't know what they're doing, how do you know what they're doing? Whereas if you can describe what you're doing, you can say, okay, now I'm doing a corner and I have to do this. I have to name the certain techniques, or I have to name the certain parts of the corner. Okay, if I know the start of the corner is called the approach, if I know the middle of the corner is called the apex, and if I know the exit of the corner is called the run out,
Right.
or the exit, then I straight away I can form a framework and I can understand when and where to perform the different parts of the technique. So that overlays one principle which I like to share with riders, in that once you can name it, you can tame it.
Okay.
Once you can name what is your problem, and you can name the different parts of your problem, and you can name the techniques or the solutions that can help you solve your problem, then you can tame the problem itself.
True.
Yeah.
Okay, well, nice. And Wilson, what are your three biggest learning lessons in your 13 years in the mountain biking coaching industry?
I have to think about this for a while. I think the number one thing I've learned, one of the first three things I learned, is that not everyone is easy to coach. Not everyone is coachable. There are people
Agree.
who are easy to coach, and there are people who are next to impossible or impossible to coach. And they can be your best friend. It can be someone you ride with like regularly, but if you introduce the idea of coaching to such a person, the person who finds it very hard to coach might not necessarily dislike coaching, but when they undergo coaching, you quickly find that they want to do their own thing. They have their own mindset about what is right and what is wrong. I think that is probably my biggest struggle as a coach, like identifying or coming to terms with people who I know, who I want to help them. I want to help them a great deal as a rider, as their friend.
Right.
Maybe as their teammate even, but they just don't show the interest or the inclination to be better as a rider, and they can feel that they can wing it themselves, and they may not want to seek improvement. I think that's okay per se, but at the same time, I also find that those people who are very easy to coach, they are always asking questions. They are trying to find out more about how they can improve, and they are trying to create frameworks on themselves on how to structure their riding or structure their approach to riding. And I think that's ultimately more engaging and more fulfilling to me.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I think another another thing I learned as a coach, especially in the mountain bike coaching space, is that people are always keen to get coaching from their friends.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing. I think friends are very well-meaning for a start. Usually people get into the sport from a friend who is more experienced. You know, if you are a novice or first-timer, your friend is probably going to lend you a bike. Your friend's probably going to bring you on a trail for the first time. Your friend's probably going to make some recommendations about what bike you're going to get or what equipment to buy. And I think a very responsible friend can and should be able to do all these things. But where I think a friend might falter is coaching their first-timer friend through a trail.
Yep.
Or even selecting the correct kind of trail for them to have their first few mountain bike experiences on. And I think that can be a bit problematic because good friends may not necessarily be good coaches. I even go so far as to say that your friend may not know what they're doing. So I think the advantage of having a hired coach, a certified coach, is that, you know, yes, of course, you do have to pay money for the coach, usually. You know, we don't charge cheap, I have to say.
Of course.
But the coach usually has an understanding of the framework and where the person is at, okay? And a coach is usually able to assess whether this person is ready for this trail versus another trail, which might be too much for them.
Right.
A coach is probably better able to advise the rider on skills and drills that they must do at a lower level first before they progress to higher level stuff. Okay. And I think a coach is better able to understand the rider's mindset and provide some feedback for them. You know, I think this is super important. Sometimes a rider comes to me and they might be riding for a few years. You know, they're not so much a beginner anymore. But when I assess them and I see them ride, they look like they're a beginner, even though they've been riding for years. And then you come to the problem where I have to coach them and untrain them from all the bad habits that they may have picked up. And they may have picked up the bad habits from their friends who have been trying to coach them for I don't know how long. But I think this is the kind of challenge which I enjoy as an instructor and a coach.
Right.
And I think that's it's a cool thing. You know, it's an ongoing process. We are trying to change the mindset of people one rider at a time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
I think the third thing that is important to understand that I learned as an instructor, right, and as a coach, is that a very, very good rider, a very fit and very credentialed rider, as in somebody who might be winning races or very fast or have the best Strava times. You know, if you look on Strava, they always have the best times. These people may not necessarily make the best coaches. So a good athlete doesn't make a good coach or good instructor. You know, I think more importantly, a good instructor or a good coach should be someone who is a good communicator and a good teacher, somebody who's willing to impart information. Yeah. Do I think there are good athletes out there who are also good instructors? Yeah, of course. I think so. You know, I think people who are good athletes who enjoy winning and who understand the mindset of winning, they have every right to share their experience as people who have been in that realm to people who are maybe less experienced, who want to experience the same kind of progress with their riding. You know, but I think to start off with, coaches and instructors need to come from a place where they get to understand themselves first, and they understand that they may not be the best communicator, or they may not be the best demonstrator, or they may not be so good at describing certain things yet. Until they get better at that, then they can call themselves somebody who is, okay, maybe I can start to be a good coach now. I can start to share the information in a way that is coherent, that is beneficial, that is going to not kill my client, or not kill my athlete on the first go. It's going to be a more collaborative and a more two-way feedback-based kind of thing.
Right.
And I think that kind of makes sense too, especially when you talk about higher performance people, like riders who want to get fast. They say, I want to train for this competition or whatever. They often go and seek advice from people who are already fast or who have already won similar events. You know, but when you talk to the so-called accoladed person, you know, or the person who has already won this or that, they may not be able to accurately describe how they do certain things or why they're able to do certain things. A coach who is able to do that is able to break it down and say, hey, you know why this person got such and such and such accolades? Because they did this. And I'll make a disclaimer right now, like, I do race occasionally. I don't think I'm a very, very good athlete. I still think I have a lot of things to improve as a racer, but I do race. And I enjoy racing because in a sense that it's a way for me to prove to myself what I've been doing or what I've been instructing And what I've been sharing with people actually works.
Oh.
In a way, you got to set an example, right?
Right.
Yeah. And
Okay.
what better way than to subject yourself to the same process?
What impact do you hope to have on your students' lives beyond just riding skills?
Well, I think impacting someone's life from a sport like mountain biking can take on many forms. I say I would like to use the sport as a vehicle for people to learn about why it's important to be more holistic, okay, to have a more well-rounded approach to what you're trying to achieve. Okay, if you're trying to be a better rider, you can't just work on the skills. You also need to work on the physical. You also need to work on the mental. You also need to work on understanding your equipment. So we talked about this earlier.
Yep.
When we talk about how we can translate that to life or other aspects of life, we need to talk about addressing the physical, the mental, the technical stuff, aspects of it. We need to understand why doing something, why it should matter to them, and how much do they want it. If you want to be really good at something, you can't just take a stopgap approach like, oh, I'll do this and automatically I have this outcome. Right. Sometimes you don't get a short-term or instant gratification based outcome. Sometimes the outcome that you're seeking requires a more long-term approach. So as a coach or as an instructor turning into a coach, I'm able to persuade people to say that, hey, you really want to take a long-term view to what you're doing as a rider. I know you want to race this race. I know you want to do this, but it's going to take a while.
Right.
I think most people have a short-term view on what they want to achieve in life, when actually what they should be doing is taking a long-term view.
Yep.
I think I can share a very good example with this, right? Like if I want to teach somebody how to do a pedaling front wheel lift, that means pedal the bike strongly and then the front wheel comes off the ground.
Oh, okay.
Versus doing a wheelie, which is like the same thing, but keeping the wheel up in the air for a sustained amount of time. I think if you teach like a novice or even intermediate rider on how to do a pedaling wheel lift, I can instruct them to do it within like 30 minutes easily in a car park. No problem at all. Yeah, they can just do pedaling wheel lift. They can lift the wheel over curbs and logs and stuff. I often get a lot of requests on how to do pedaling wheel lift.
Okay.
Wilson, I want to learn how to go over this log. I want to go over this curb. I say, yeah, sure. That's what you do. Yeah.
Okay.
But then sometimes I get requests like, Wilson, I want to learn how to do a wheelie. And I say, oh, shoot. So suddenly now it's not a 30-minute job. Now you might take 6 months to learn how to do a wheelie.
Oh.
Because a wheelie is so much more demanding. It's such a more advanced maneuver that you need to pull off. And I can teach you the basics, the techniques required to do a wheelie, but then you still have to go and do the practice. You still got to do the mileage. And you're not even going to get it in the first half. You're definitely not going to get it in the first half an hour. You may not even get it in the first half of the day.
Right.
You might not even get it in the first month. I would say that you need to go and keep doing this and really applying yourself, getting the mileage done. And I think that's what separates, understanding what a short-term approach is versus a long-term approach. In that, in a long-term approach, and what I want to impart on my students for a long-term approach is they really need to have determination to see themselves through to what they want. They need to have resilience and not giving up so easily.
True.
And I think
I agree.
that applies, of course, to other parts of life. Right? If you want something that's cool, right? Well, I want to do a wheelie. I want to look cool in front of of the opposite gender or whatever it is. I want to impress my friends. You have to do the work.
Yeah.
You have
definitely.
to make it count. And a lot of the practice is done away from people. A lot of practice is done by yourself in silence, away from the attention and away from the accolades. I think that tells more broadly of how people should approach what they want to achieve in terms of success. A lot of the success building is done in anonymity and in silence.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, nice. And I'd like to ask you, right, Wilson, if you could meet a rider or influential person in the mountain bike scene and ride with them for a day, who would it be and what would you want to learn from them?
Wow, I think straight up, the person I would like to hang out for a day with would be this very decorated and accoladed mountain bike coach or high performance coach. His name is Alan Milway. So Alan Milway, he currently works as the performance director for Norco Factory Division. It's a pro mountain bike downhill team, and their athletes race on the World Cup circuit.
Yep.
I've listened to quite a number of podcasts where Alan Milway was interviewed, and I think understanding what he says, through all these podcasts gives me a lot of insight. Like, wow, this is the kind of person who really gets mountain biking. He's able to break it down and understand that mountain biking is really a culmination of the physical as well as the technical aspects of of human performance, but also he, without being like a full-on like sports psychologist, he's able to understand like the mindset behind what it goes to making elite performances count. What I want to learn from Alan, if I could hang out with him for a day, would be to understand like the structure of team management. Like, how do you manage a professional team, professional team of mountain bikers? And it's not just the mountain biker per se, right? It's also the mechanics, the drivers, the sports massage therapists, nutritionists, people who are behind the scenes managing, sponsors and all that kind of stuff. I think that kind of behind the scenes look into what goes into a factory level professional mountain bike team be very insightful for someone like me, because I myself am trying to get into like management. I'm trying to manage some of my own athletes.
Nice.
With my own athlete development program. So Raw Epics has an athlete development program. Okay, it's a very maybe uninspired name. It's simply called Raw Epics Athlete Development, or READ for short. So we are in the process of developing a few athletes who we sponsor.
Oh, nice.
And we also have a couple of athletes who are now coming on board as clients. So we help our clients in much the same way as we do our sponsored riders. We do group training sessions together, and we hang out together. We attend races where I provide support, or hopefully I provide the correct level of support and the correct quality of support that these people enjoy, and that they understand that what I'm trying to do is to optimize their race day performance. So they don't worry about all the behind the scenes stuff. Their job is to just turn up at the start line and then race.
Okay.
And then get to the finish line. I think, coming back to your question, I want to understand all of what goes into bringing the athlete up to that level, and especially at a high level from someone as how do I say, as experienced and as decorated as Alan Milway.
Right. Okay. And last but not least, I'd like to ask you, what is one thing you do every day that allows you to improve?
Wow. I think I make it a point every day to focus on my mobility. So I personally prefer to be more mobile, and I do exercises, any time of the day, but at least once a day, where I stretch, I make sure my joints are serviceable,
right,
and I get up and move. And I say this from two perspectives, right? One thing is that I'm a business owner, so sometimes I find that I'm sitting at the desk or sitting on my computer, working for very long periods of time, and I get into that sedentary mode, which is terrible. I think it's I feel so tired, just working on my computer and having to do the necessary stuff, right? But I do get up and move. I think it's important. And I think getting up to move helps me reset and recalibrate, both physically and mentally.
Right.
And secondly, I think mobility, I come from it from the perspective of a rider myself, especially a rider who is maybe getting on in my years. I'm not so young anymore. So I do want to set an example for the athletes, especially the younger athletes that I'm coaching. I want to tell them, hey, you may be very mobile now, but if you get older, you get to my age, maybe get older than me even, you want to be able to be riding well beyond the so-called elite years. You can be a master's athlete, you can be a senior athlete even. You want to be able to enjoy the sport up to your old age. So being mobile ensures that I'm still able to do the sport which I love. At the heart of it, I'm still a rider.
Right.
I may be a business owner, and my business may be involved with helping other riders, but at the heart of it, I do want to help myself, and I want to enjoy my riding years long into the future.
Okay. Well, nice. And where can our audience find you on social media?
So I'm mostly active on Instagram.
Okay.
Raw.epics. You can find my Instagram handle there. I also have a Facebook account that's linked to that. rawepics.com is my website. So I bought a website for that. But beyond all this, I actually first started in YouTube. So I do have a YouTube channel.
Oh, okay.
So I think a lot of people found me through YouTube, and I started doing very heavy into YouTube mountain bike content.
Okay.
Yeah, I think video as a medium is a great way to convey the action and the fun of mountain biking. So I really went down YouTube. So if you search out Raw Epics on YouTube, you'll be able to find me and a bit of what I do over there.
Okay, nice. So for those of you who are tuning in, thank you so much for listening and watching the GrowCast Show episode 93. This is Rayson, your host, and I'm really blessed to have you here on the podcast. And stay tuned for another episode of the GrowCast Show. See you and take care. Bye-bye.